He saw a black woman in a modest car and sneered, ready to teach her a lesson. He had no idea he was arresting the one person who could bring the entire justice system to its knees. The morning air on Hawthorne Drive was a quiet luxury, thick with the scent of cut grass and old money. Sunlight, filtered through the dense canopy of 100-year-old oaks, dappled the immaculate pavement in shifting patterns of gold. It was a street that had mastered the art of serene indifference, a world away from the city's frantic pulse. Through this tranquil tableau, a dark blue Lexus sedan moved with a silent, measured grace. It wasn't new, but its paint held a deep, liquid polish, a testament to meticulous care. It was a car that didn't shout, it simply was. Behind the wheel, Judge Evelyn Hayes, 50 years old and at the apex of her career, felt the familiar calm of her Saturday ritual. Her hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, her posture a study in composed strength. This drive to a small, independent art gallery to collect a commissioned painting was more than an errand, it was an anchor. It was a space of quiet contemplation before returning to the monumental weight of the federal appellate court, a world of statutes and precedents where her mind, sharp as a scalpel, dissected the very fabric of American law. She wasn't thinking of the law now. She was thinking of the artist, a young woman whose use of light and shadow reminded her of Caravaggio, and the small joy of bringing a new piece of beauty into her home. Her power wasn't worn like a crown, it was integrated, as much a part of her as her steady breathing, a quiet confidence born not of age, but of a profound understanding of the systems she navigated. A few blocks behind, in a marked patrol car, that same quiet confidence was being interpreted very differently. Officer Kyler Vance sat in the passenger seat, a sour knot tightening in his gut. He watched the Lexus, his eyes narrowed. "Look at that," he muttered, more to himself than to his younger partner, Officer Miller, who was driving. Hawthorne Drive. Dark blue Lexus. Bet you $100 she doesn't live here. Miller glanced at the car, then back at the road. "It's just a car, Kentucky." "No, it's not just a car," Vance shot back, his voice hardening. "It's a posture. It's that same look they all get, the educated ones, the ones who think they've made it. They glide through these neighborhoods like they own the place, looking down on everyone. Thinking their degrees and their fancy cars make them the law." The bitterness in his tone was sharp enough to cut glass. Miller stayed silent, a familiar unease creeping in. He'd heard this speech before. It was Vance's prelude to an unnecessary show of force, a way to reassert his dominance over a world he felt was leaving him behind. Evelyn noticed the patrol car in her rearview mirror but thought little of it. It was a part of the landscape. She signaled her turn, her movements fluid and unhurried. For Vance, that very smoothness was an affront. It wasn't the hurried, nervous motion of someone who felt out of place, it was the precise, deliberate action of someone who belonged. And in Kyler Vance's world, that was a direct challenge to his authority. He didn't need a reason. His reason was a cocktail of resentment, prejudice, and the intoxicating power of the badge pinned to his chest. He keyed his mic, the static hiss filling the car. "Dispatch, showing a 1 Adam 12 conducting a traffic stop. Hawthorne and Elm. Blue Lexus, license plate." He read the numbers aloud, his voice flat and official, a mask for the petty tyranny about to unfold. Miller's hands tightened on the wheel. "Kai, we don't have anything on her." "We do now," Vance said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. He reached over and flipped the switch. The sudden, piercing shriek of the siren tore through the morning's tranquility. A cascade of red and blue lights flashed across Evelyn's rearview mirror, painting her face in garish, urgent strokes. She sighed, a soft, weary sound. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't scared. She was simply, profoundly tired. But she pulled the car over to the curb, its tires coming to a gentle stop. She turned off the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the frantic beating of the flashing lights. In her mirror, she watched him emerge, a man cloaked in the state's authority, walking toward her with the heavy, deliberate steps of someone who believed he was the judge, the jury, and the law itself. Officer Vance's shadow fell across the driver's side window before he rapped on the glass with a sharp, impatient knuckle. It wasn't a knock, it was a summons. Evelyn lowered the window a few inches, just enough for her voice to carry the cool morning air, a stark contrast to the heat radiating from his presence. "License and registration," he commanded, his voice a clipped bark. He leaned down, his face uncomfortably close, his eyes scanning the car's interior as if searching for contraband. Evelyn didn't move. Her hands remained on the wheel. "Good morning, officer. May I ask the reason for the stop?" Her tone was even, devoid of accusation or fear. It was the voice of a person accustomed to asking questions and expecting coherent answers. The simple question seemed to ignite something in Vance. It was the response of an equal, not a subordinate, and it was intolerable. "The reason," he scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips, "is that I'm giving you an order. License. And registration. Now." From the sidewalk, a young man on a delivery route paused, his package held mid-stride. On a balcony across the street, a woman in a silk robe lowered her coffee cup, her brow furrowed. They couldn't hear the words, but the tableau was unmistakable, a uniformed officer looming over a seated woman, the tension coiling between them like a snake. "Officer," Evelyn said, her voice remaining perfectly calm, "under the Fourth Amendment, a traffic stop requires reasonable suspicion of a crime. I have broken no laws. Therefore, I respectfully ask again, what is the violation?" It was like throwing gasoline on a fire. To Vance, her precision was insolence. Her knowledge was a weapon aimed directly at his fragile ego. "You think you're a lawyer," he spat. "You think you can talk your way out of this? That's it. Get out of the car." He reached for the door handle. Evelyn anticipated the move, opening the door herself and stepping out with an economy of motion that spoke of innate dignity. She stood, not tall, but with an unshakable centeredness. It was at that moment that young Officer Miller, watching from the patrol car, felt a cold dread solidify in his stomach. This was wrong. The woman carried herself with an authority that had nothing to do with defiance and everything to do with substance. He wanted to say something, to intervene, but Vance's rage was a physical force that pinned him to his seat. "Hands behind your back," Vance ordered. As Evelyn complied, her movements slow and deliberate, Vance leaned toward Miller, who had now exited the vehicle and was standing awkwardly a few feet away. "See that look on her face?" Vance hissed, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for his partner. "That's the look. Just like those elitist black intellectuals who think they are the law. I'm going to teach her what the real law looks like on Hawthorne Drive." The cold, metallic click of the handcuffs locking around Evelyn's wrists echoed in the quiet street. It was a sound of profound violation. She didn't flinch, didn't cry out. She simply stood, her back straight, as he roughly shoved her toward the front of her own car. "Let's see what you're hiding," Vance growled, yanking her designer handbag from the passenger seat. He appended it onto the hood of the Lexus, its contents spilling out, a leather-bound journal, a fountain pen, a wallet, and a silk scarf. And something else. Something heavy. It slid off the pile of belongings, hitting the asphalt with a crisp, definitive clang. The sound sliced through the tension. Before Vance could react, Miller instinctively bent down and picked it up. He turned it over in his palm. His breath hitched. His face, already pale, went completely ashen. He held it out, his hand trembling, as if offering up a holy relic. It was a medallion, not gold, but a heavy, platinum-finished disc. In the center, an eagle was rendered in deep blue and white enamel, wings spread wide. Around the edge, engraved in sharp, clear letters, were the words, "United States Court of Appeals, Federal Circuit." And beneath the eagle, the inscription, "Judge Evelyn Hayes." Vance snatched the medallion from Miller's hand, his knuckles white. He stared at it, his mind refusing to process what his eyes were seeing. The weight of it, the cold, official precision of the engraving, it felt real. Too real. And that reality was a direct assault on the world he had constructed just moments before, a world where he was the unquestioned authority. "What is this garbage?" he roared, his voice cracking with a frantic energy. He wasn't asking, he was trying to bully reality itself into submission. He thrust the medallion toward Evelyn's face. "You think this fake piece of tin means something? You can buy these things online." From the sidewalk, the delivery driver had his phone out, recording. The woman on the balcony had been joined by her husband. The silent audience was growing, their presence a palpable pressure. Evelyn met Vance's furious gaze, her own expression one of profound, almost clinical calm. "Officer," she said, her voice cutting through his tirade, "prejudice cannot be entered as evidence in your report, but that medallion can." Her words, so devoid of fear, so full of unassailable logic, were like a physical blow. They didn't challenge his authority, they simply ignored it, rendering it irrelevant. This enraged him further. "That's it, you're coming with me," he snarled, shoving her toward the patrol car. "We're going to find out just how fake you are." He bundled her into the back seat, the doors slamming shut with a sound of finality. The ride to the precinct was a tense, suffocating silence. Vance drove with white-knuckled fury, while Miller stared out the window, the image of the medallion seared into his mind. At the station, Vance hauled Evelyn out of the car with unnecessary force, marching her through the bullpen as if she were a prize catch. He cuffed her to a cold metal bench in the processing area, the same bench used for petty thieves and drunkards. He dumped the contents of her purse, including the medallion, onto a scarred metal table. "Let's see who you really are," he muttered, grabbing her wallet. But as his fingers fumbled with the clasp, several other officers in the room began to stir. They had seen the woman. They saw her composure, her expensive but understated clothes, her air of quiet dignity. And they saw the raw, unchecked aggression in their colleague, Kyler Vance. Something was deeply wrong. "Kai, what's going on?" Sergeant Diaz asked, approaching cautiously. "Just processing a suspect." Non-compliant, potential impersonation of a federal officer, Vance grunted, not looking up. It was then that Evelyn spoke again, her voice resonating with a new, chilling authority that filled the sterile room. "You are not processing a suspect, Officer Vance. You are digging your own professional grave. And I will have a front-row seat to the burial." The air in the room went still. Every officer froze. The sheer, unshakable power in her voice was undeniable. It was the voice of someone who didn't just know the law, but embodied it. Just then, the main doors to the precinct swung open. A man in a sharp, dark suit strode in, flanked by two others. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Evelyn chained to the bench. His face tightened with a mixture of fury and alarm. He strode forward, flashing an ID at Sergeant Diaz that made the sergeant take an involuntary step back. The man ignored everyone else. He walked directly to Evelyn, his voice a low, respectful murmur. "Judge Hayes. Are you all right? We came as soon as we got the call." Judge Hayes. The name landed in the center of the room like a grenade. Kyler Vance looked up from the wallet, his face a mask of dawning horror. He saw the suited man, recognized the bearing of a federal agent. He looked at the woman on the bench, truly looked at her for the first time, and saw not a suspect, but the architect of his ruin. The walls of his world, built on a foundation of bigotry and brute force, crumbled to dust in a single, silent moment. Before the federal agent had even finished escorting a freed Judge Hayes from the precinct, the digital wildfire had begun. The delivery driver's 32-second video, shaky, raw, and utterly damning, hit the internet. It showed it all, Vance's sneering face, the click of the handcuffs, Evelyn's unshakable poise, and the glint of the heavy medallion on the asphalt. Within an hour, it had 100,000 views. By nightfall, it was in the millions. The hashtag Justice for Judge Hayes wasn't just trending, it was a global phenomenon. News outlets, initially cautious, were swept up in the tidal wave of public outrage. The story was perfect, a stark, visual metaphor for a nation grappling with its own soul. It was a clash of two Americas in miniature, one defined by brute, prejudiced authority, the other by quiet, intellectual power. At the center of the storm, Kyler Vance was in denial. He reported for his next shift as if nothing had happened, convinced it would all blow over. But the atmosphere in the precinct had changed. The easy camaraderie was gone, replaced by wary glances and strained silence. His locker had been moved. His partner, Miller, had been reassigned pending an internal review. When Vance tried to corner Miller in the hallway, the young officer simply looked at him, his eyes full of a new, cold clarity, and said, "I gave them my statement, Kentucky. I gave them the audio from my body cam." He then walked away, leaving Vance standing alone in a corridor that now felt miles long. The first cracks in the blue wall of silence were appearing. Meanwhile, in the bustling newsroom of the Metropolitan Chronicle, an investigative journalist named Sarah Jenkins was already digging deeper. While other reporters focused on the spectacle, Sarah was obsessed with a single question: was this a one-time explosion of temper, or was this a pattern? She was a veteran reporter who knew that men like Kyler Vance didn't just snap, they eroded over time, their transgressions enabled by a system of silent complicity. She spent 2 days buried in public records, cross-referencing court filings, citizen complaints, and dismissed cases. It was tedious, frustrating work. Then, she got a hit. A civil suit filed 2 years prior, dismissed for lack of evidence. It was filed by a 19-year-old Latino man, Marco Reyes, who claimed he was pulled from his car, verbally abused, and threatened by an officer after being stopped for driving erratically. The officer's name was Kyler Vance. Sarah found Marco working at a garage in a different part of the city. He was hesitant to talk at first, his eyes shadowed with a familiar fear. "No one believed me then," he said, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "They said it was my word against the cops." "What's the point?" "The point," Sarah said gently, sliding a printed screenshot of the viral video across the counter, "is that this time, everyone is watching." Marco stared at the image of Judge Hayes, her face a mask of calm dignity even in humiliation. He then looked at Vance's contorted, angry expression. Recognition flickered in his eyes, then hardened into resolve. He began to talk. He recounted the details of his stop, the specific racial slurs Vance had used, the terror he had felt. He had a recording, he said, a grainy audio file from his phone that he had been too afraid to share with the dismissive internal affairs investigators. That night, Sarah Jenkins uploaded her article. It ran with the headline, "Officer in Judge Hayes' case has a history, and a victim has the tape to prove it." The article, complete with Marco's harrowing testimony and the chilling audio file, added a new, explosive layer to the scandal. It was no longer just about one egregious mistake. It was about a predator who had been allowed to hunt, protected by the very system he was sworn to serve. Sarah Jenkins' article turned the firestorm into an inferno. The audio of Vance threatening a teenager confirmed what many already suspected: Judge Hayes' arrest wasn't an anomaly, it was the inevitable result of a pattern of unchecked aggression. The public outcry reached a fever pitch, forcing the hand of the state attorney's office. A special investigative task force was officially formed, not just to review the arrest of Judge Hayes, but to conduct a full audit of Officer Kyler Vance's entire career. Judge Hayes herself remained publicly silent. She declined interviews and issued no statements, a decision that baffled the media but was, in itself, a strategic masterstroke. Her silence created a vacuum that the facts rushed in to fill. It forced the system to investigate itself, without her having to appear as a vengeful accuser. Privately, however, she was not idle. From her home office, she reached out to her network of former clerks and legal protégés. Through a secure channel, she provided the task force with a meticulously detailed memorandum, outlining, from memory, every potential procedural violation she had observed during her arrest, citing specific statutes and departmental codes. It was a legal blueprint for prosecution. The investigation began to move with startling speed. At a local law school, a team of student volunteers, inspired by the case, started a pro bono project. They spent days sifting through publicly available data on traffic stops and arrests from Vance's precinct. Working with a statistics professor, they built a model that laid bare a stunning truth: Kyler Vance's rate of stopping and searching drivers of color was more than 5 times the department average. His conviction rate from those stops, however, was near zero. It was a clear, data-driven picture of harassment, not law enforcement. The students passed their findings to Sarah Jenkins, who, in turn, shared them with the task force. The pieces were locking into place, forming a portrait of a rogue officer. But the most critical question remained: was he truly a rogue, or was he protected? The answer came from an anonymous source deep within the police department. A plain manila envelope was slipped under Sarah Jenkins' office door. Inside were photocopies of 3 internal affairs complaints filed against Vance over the past 5 years. All were for excessive force or verbal abuse. And all 3 had been dismissed and sealed by the same man, Deputy Chief Marcus Duval. Sarah's blood ran cold. Duval was a powerful, well-respected figure, next in line for the chief's job. The files showed he had personally intervened in each case, citing insufficient evidence or unreliable witness testimony, effectively burying the complaints and allowing Vance to continue his reign of terror. Suddenly, the story was no longer about one bad cop. It was about a conspiracy of silence, a systemic rot that reached into the department's highest ranks. The task force, now armed with this new evidence, subpoenaed Duval. The deputy chief's involvement became the new, explosive headline. The case had breached the blue wall and was now threatening to bring down the entire command structure. Facing immense political pressure and the undeniable weight of the evidence, the state legislature announced it would hold a special public hearing on police conduct and oversight. It was a move designed to quell public anger, a piece of political theater. But it backfired when they received a short, formal letter. Judge Evelyn Hayes, the woman at the center of it all, the woman who had remained a figure of powerful silence, officially accepted their invitation to speak. The news broke like a thunderclap. The theater was about to become a courtroom, and the entire nation would be watching. The day of the hearing, the air around the state capitol was electric. The chamber was packed, a standing room-only crowd of journalists, lawyers, activists, and citizens. Kyler Vance was not present. Deputy Chief Duval sat stone-faced with the police union's attorneys, a man watching his career evaporate in the harsh glare of television lights. When Judge Evelyn Hayes entered, a hush fell over the room. She wore a simple, dark gray suit and walked with a steady, unhurried gait. She took her seat, arranged a single folder of notes before her, and waited. She didn't look at Duval. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked directly at the members of the legislative committee. After the perfunctory opening statements, it was her turn. She did not raise her voice. She did not perform outrage. She simply began to speak, her voice a calm, resonant instrument of pure reason. Good morning. My name is Evelyn Hayes. On the morning of October 12th, I was stopped, humiliated, and arrested without cause. But I am not here to talk about my feelings. I am here to talk about the system that made that morning not just possible, but probable. For the next 20 minutes, she laid out the case not against a man, but against a machine. She used the students' data to illustrate the statistical certainty of Vance's racial bias. She used Sarah Jenkins' reporting and Marco Reyes's testimony to give that data a human face. She referenced the internal affairs documents to expose the protective shield provided by Duval. And she wove it all together with a surgeon's precision, citing legal precedent and constitutional law. This, she concluded, her gaze finally sweeping across the entire room, is not the failure of one officer. It is the failure of a culture that mistakes aggression for strength, and silence for complicity. It is the failure of a system that fears accountability more than it fears injustice. Your task is not to punish one man. It is to repair the system so that no citizen, regardless of their station or the color of their skin, has their dignity stripped away on the side of a road. Her testimony was devastating. It left no room for argument, no space for excuses. It was a public vivisection of a diseased system. The fallout was swift and absolute. Within 48 hours, the district attorney, citing the overwhelming evidence presented, filed a multi-count indictment against Kyler Vance. Deputy Chief Duvall was suspended and became the subject of a federal investigation into obstruction of justice. The trial was a formality. Vance was found guilty and sentenced to a significant prison term. The city had its villain. But the story didn't end there. Evelyn's words at the hearing had planted a seed. Across the country, police departments began reviewing their oversight procedures. Sparked by a coalition of civil rights groups, several states adopted new legislation aimed at creating independent review boards and tracking officer misconduct. Unofficially, it became known as the Hayes Clause. Evelyn Hayes returned to her life. She accepted no awards, gave no high-profile interviews. She wanted no statues. Her victory was not in the verdict, but in the echo. A year later, she was driving down Hawthorne Drive, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows. A patrol car fell in behind her. For a moment, the world held its breath. The patrol car did not speed up. Its lights remained off. As Evelyn stopped at a traffic light, the young officer in the driver's seat simply looked over and gave a short, distinct nod. It was a gesture of respect. A silent acknowledgement of a new and better order. Her story became a permanent part of the legal and cultural landscape, a quiet testament to the immense power of unyielding dignity. It serves as a reminder that the most profound changes often begin not with a shout, but with the steadfast refusal of a single person to be diminished. What do you think? Does true strength lie in the volume of our outrage, or in the resilience of our character? The story of Judge Hayes suggests the answer lies in the latter. It challenges us to consider how we would react when faced with injustice. If this story moved you, please share it. Let's have a conversation about what real courage looks like. And as always, let's show respect for every perspective in the comments below. Subscribe for more stories that make you think.